Good morning. Welcome to Freeway Bible Study for today, the second day of July 2018. Seems like it's been a long time since our last installment. That's because I've been kind of stuck on, not really stuck as much, engrossed by the interest of chapter 3 of the book of Exodus. This is the chapter with the burning bush. And it's led me on a long and winding road, so to speak. So, quickly, my name is Kurt Bell. I'm your host of Freeway Bible Study. I'm a non-believer, but I enjoy reading the Bible and studying and learning about the stories so that I can understand these things and speak from an informed perspective when such conversations come up. So, I've been following the story of Exodus now, which is, of course, the story of Moses, and a part of the story of Moses. And so far, we've seen Moses born as a Hebrew slave in Egypt and cast into the river on a papyrus raft, rescued by the daughter of Pharaoh, raised as an Egyptian prince, giving up his prestige in search of honor and rescuing a Hebrew man who was being beaten by an Egyptian taskmaster, and escaping to Midian, where he is now, and he's been married to the daughter of a man named Jethro, but he's also got another name, who's also a priest, and he's probably a priest of the God that will be Yahweh. I think it's it was a group of part of my research showed there was a group of Bedouins that lived out there in that area of the northwest coastal region of Saudi Arabia, of what is currently Saudi Arabia, and they had a god that lived on a mountain, Mount Horeb, and apparently his name was Yahweh. And although we don't have Yahweh's name just yet, he does introduce himself as the God of Abraham, Abraham, Isaac, and Joseph. So now, so here's the scene. So Moses is a runaway. He's set up a new life in Horeb. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. He's been married. He's got a son, and he's tending to the flocks of his father-in-law, the priestly father-in-law Jethro. Now, what isn't said in the story, but I think we can safely assume, is that Jethro, being a priest, and we know that there's a priest of what? Well, it looks like he's a priest of the mountain god, the very mountain that Moses is tending sheep around at this time. And so Moses then goes around the back, he's tending the sheep, and he goes around the back side of the mountain. And upon the flanks of the mountain, suddenly he encounters, here we go, the burning bush at last. We got to it. Now, the bush is aflame, but it's not burning. So I wonder if it's crackling or making any sound, or if it's just a visual thing. But now, attending to the bush is not initially God himself, but an angel of the Lord, a representative. And some of my research told me that it was common at that time that kings would send representatives, and that representative would basically speak and act and be in direct stead of the king. And so the scholarship said that at that time, people reading the story or hearing the story spoken aloud would have assumed that what's initially introduced as an angel through the burning bush would have continued to be the angel, even though it's referenced as God later. But that's the emissary of God, the angel of God, speaking to Moses. So I don't think we actually have God speaking to Moses, but we have instead the angel, this aforementioned angel. So the angel is there. Now Moses sees this bush and he's like, whoa, look at that, a burning bush that's not burning up, it's not being consumed. I think I'll get a little closer. So he starts to come around to get a better look. And here's where it says God sees what sees Moses' approach and then speaks to Moses through the bush. And I think that it's not actually, again, not actually God speaking, but the angel of the Lord speaking. Although God is probably witnessing this. Of course he's witnessing it, being omniscient. So as Moses begins to approach the bush, the angel of the Lord, or maybe it's God himself, says, Moses, Moses. And I was kind of struck by this is the second time that God kind of has to raise his voice to be heard. Remember that happened earlier back in Genesis. Moses, take off your shoes before you get any closer, and don't get any closer, because this is holy ground. And suddenly Moses realized that he's in the presence of the Lord, and he does as the Lord says. And God then goes on to, or the angel then goes on to tell Moses that he has come down from heaven. And I just noticed that just as I was preparing to make this video. He says that he comes down. So I wonder if we can hold God to that. Does he really mean come down? That would seem to fit with the concept of a heaven somewhere up in the clouds, right? Or up in space. So where exactly is it? Or is it that he's a mountain god and he's come down from the summit of the mountain onto the lower flanks? In any case, he's come down. And he says, I've come down because I've noticed the plight of my children, my chosen people in Egypt, who are subject to the pharaoh under slavery and who are being mistreated by him and their misery for the past 400 plus years. He doesn't say the 400, but we know it's been 400 from Genesis, from the chronology they're in. And so he says, Moses, I want you now, and he just goes straight to the point. He says, I want you to go now, go, like just get going. Go to Egypt, and I want you to because I've got a task for you. I mean, it's not like prepare to go or get your stuff, but just go now. Now remember, Moses has got a wife and a kid and a family here, that he's in-law into. So I mean, it's not that easy. So he must have been taken aback by him for a bit. And God says, I want you to go to Egypt. I want you to meet with the elders of the Jewish people. I want you to tell them that you're on a mission from God. Isn't that from a movie? Isn't that a movie line? We're on a mission from God. That's the Blues Brothers, right? We're on a mission from God. Oh my gosh, Moses is the original Blues Brother. I don't mean to be silly, but it's hard not to be silly when these silly things come up, and another silly one's coming up as well, because. He says, I want you to tell the elders that you're on a mission from me to see Pharaoh and petition to let the people go. And Moses is like, what? Me? Who? He's looking around. Who are you talking to? Are you talking to me? Just who am I to do this? He literally says that. Who am I? I'm just little old Moses. What do you mean? Who am I? You're a prince among Pharaoh's court. You speak Hebrew, Egyptian, and whatever languages of the people where you're living now. I mean, you're amply qualified, Moses. Of course, you're the guy. But what he's really speaking to is that the Jewish elders won't believe him. It's like he just appears out of nowhere, literally from the wilderness, and says, "I'm here to escort the people into freedom." The 2 to 4 million Jews. And God says, "Well, just tell them I sent you." And they say, "Well, what if they ask who it was that sent it?" I said, "Just tell them that it's I am who I am sent you, or just I am." And that's where I got to be silly again, because when I first read that, I thought, wait a minute, that's Popeye's line, right? I am who I am. But I think he says yam instead of am. Or I am what I am, or I am who I am. Yeah, I think it says I am who I am, God says. I think Popeye says I am what I am. Anyway, so he's identifying himself as I am. Like that's going to do the job. I guess it will. Well, I guess we know that this God is willing to, mess with people's minds. So he could basically have said, there's a turnip on the windowsill, and that'll prove it. And then as long as he just conditions people's minds by, miraculous influence to say anything about a turnip is sufficient proof that it's me, then they would. So You can just get away with anything, can't you, if you just believe in magic. So now he says that, and God goes on to say, when you would get there and you do this, you're going to find, and you go to see Pharaoh, you're going to find that Pharaoh, and I want you to do is tell Pharaoh, kind of lie to Pharaoh a little bit. Say, I want to take the people, because he wants Moses to go to the Pharaoh with all of the Egyptian elders and say, we want to go 3 days into the wilderness to make sacrifice unto our God. Now that's no small undertaking, right? If you're talking 2 to 4 million people, that's like more than half the population of Egypt itself. And you want them to go away for 3 days? I mean, just the logistics alone is startling. But God tells Moses, Pharaoh will not be willing to do this. He doesn't yet say that he will harden Pharaoh's heart, but that's coming, which I thought was cheating. But he says, Pharaoh's not going to be open to this, and it will take my mighty hand, the acts, the works, the deeds of God, to convince him to let you go. And when that happens, I want your women folk to basically plunder the wealth of the Egyptians. So if they've been working in the household of an Egyptian, I want them to borrow, is what the word is used in the King James edition, and take is used in the New International Version, or maybe I've got those two backwards. But anyway, one is borrow, one is take the gold and silver of the Egyptians for your own. And when you do that, you will then be made wealthy. But all they're going to have to do is carry that stuff around in the desert, because we know for 40 years they're not going to have a chance to spend any of it. So that'll be interesting. And they'll be sustained by manna from heaven. And then finally, there's the last bit at the end. Something about maybe a curse? No. I thought there was a final bit there. It just kind of ends all of a sudden, chapter 3, with God telling Moses that the women folk will take the goodies, and then you guys will be gone, and I think that's it. That ends. So it seems like, this only took me like 15 minutes to get through this. It seems like, why would that take you like 2 weeks just to read this one chapter? And that's because I spent a lot of time reading other things. In particular, the scholarship in my Bible that talks about the background of Exodus, that kind of provided input to some of the things I just said, as well as supplemental work, such as the supplemental mythology, such as the Epic of Gilgamesh, which only took me a day to listen to. I listened to it in audio format, but it's then another day or two to digest and think about. And that's kind of where I'm at. So hopefully tomorrow, back on track with Exodus 4. I think things are going to get a little complicated from here on in, but I have to kind of just muster my will and soldier through it as best I can. Because the story is interesting and complicated, and it's so easy to get distracted by details, which are important. It's part of why I'm doing this. But I also want to keep moving on. Otherwise, the rapture will appear before I even get to the New Testament, and then I'll be screwed. Okay, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Bye bye. Have a great day. Make it a good life.